Ladies and gentlemen, the Football Scoop Podcast is here. There was supposed to be some sort of awesome intro music. It didn't happen. These things happen some days. It's a Sunday. Scott Roussel, joined by college football expert John Brice. John Brice, I hope you got a big smile on your face. And I say for so many reasons. First of all, it's a beautiful day. You got a Christmas tree, I'm hoping.
Absolutely did. Absolutely.
Christmas presents were delivered to you early because you've been a good boy all year. Big lead. Big lead. We've allowed you to stretch your lead out in the picks competition. You got to feel good today.
I do feel good today. 13-2 with the pressure on the line is really good. I was struggling on what to wear. I couldn't find an Arkansas shirt. I've got one around here somewhere, but
Vietnam. I thought about it all night.
I was the only person who picked the Hogs. Now, I of course have my pit hat handy because I was the only person who also picked the Panthers. And then I nailed some other swing games with you. It was, I guess if I went 13-2, that means you were right around 500 at 8-7, I believe. So somebody tells me that's a 6-game lead now in the picks panel. For anyone who keeps up with those things, for anyone who might have awakened his wife and said, like, I think I went 13-2 and picked up 5 games on Scott.
It would feel really, really bad to choke this way now. Really bad. I think you got this. I mean, I could go ahead and ship the bourbon now. I mean, I see no reason why I shouldn't just ship the bourbon. There's no way you could choke this way. No way. It's almost impossible.
It is almost impossible. But you know what? That's a fitting segue for this weekend, Scott, because almost impossible became the possible.
It happened
throughout college football. And I'll give credit to you because you went into this weekend thinking there were a multitude of great games and contests that could be contests that I frankly didn't think could be contests. Now, I was really keyed up for USC, UCLA, and it absolutely delivered. It was very reminiscent in a lot of ways to Tennessee, Alabama earlier this season in terms of the back and forth, in terms of two major highly visible programs, different things going on at both of those programs. Obviously, Alabama more established of any of the four, but it just reminded me the flow of the game, dynamic quarterback play on both sides. The same thing we saw from Hendon Hooker and Bryce Young in that Alabama-Tennessee game is what we saw last night from Dorian Thompson-Robinson at UCLA and Caleb Williams at USC. Just a really fabulous, awesome football game.
So we've spoken at length about this whole, and I don't want to get into the playoff thing so much, but it's okay. So USC did their job. Tennessee kind of got out of the way. LSU did their job. The Big Ten just is like, you want a good team to come out of the Big Ten. Both teams, we talked about those two games. Michigan, Ohio State were like, one's a 3-touchdown, one's a 4-touchdown. Neither of them played to that at all. And you're like, oh no, Big Ten. Oh no. I was worried about Bielema getting Michigan and ruining all things Big Ten. And then Michigan coming back and beating Ohio State. We got a lot of football to jump into, shall we?
Yeah, and I know when you say you were worried about Bielema getting Michigan, you mean it in that you saw Illinois' chance to have a shot at an upset here. We don't want to confuse anybody and have them think you were worried about Michigan losing because you had some vested interest in Michigan winning. You were just saying you assessed the game and you felt that Brett Bielema in Illinois could be ripe to upset Michigan. And frankly, Brett Bielema still feels that way today because he's still tweeting about Big Ten officiating.
All right, so I don't even know what I mean. What I mean is I cheer for great football, and I love to see football at its best being played. The game itself, especially in the fourth quarter, was fantastic football. That was great theater. What I'm thinking about really was I want to see a great football team emerge out of the Big Ten, and let's go to the playoff, and let's see 4 great football teams just slobber knocker and just play the best. When you saw a scenario of Illinois is going to win this game, and then Michigan might rise up and beat Ohio State, and then Big Ten, you got left. I'll tell you, I was really it was the rule right, all these things. When the Michigan guy that's ruled a catch, clock's running. I'm talking about that last drive, right before the guy makes the field goal. That kicker was just money from Michigan. And you knew he was going to make it regardless. And Sonny Dykes had just had to have the team run out there and make a kick. And you're like, what's going on? They're under center. Michigan's under center. The clock's running. What's Michigan going to do? And it was a little crazy. And then the refs stop it to replay it. And you're basically just giving Michigan a timeout. And you're like, what are we doing? I thought that was garbage. Anyways.
Yeah, it was. I greatly appreciate Brett Bielema speaking his mind yesterday, following it up with an incredible tweet today saying, Illinois fans, coaches, players, I want you to know we're going back to work, and we're going to work extremely hard to learn how to defend this play in particular, and this fourth down play in particular. I thought that was brilliant. Good for Brett Bielema. It's been a breakthrough year for them. The guy's passionate. He's always been passionate in his previous stops, Wisconsin and Arkansas. And you talk to anybody, he will fight for his kids. He wears that chip on his shoulder, and he's wearing it right now. And there are a lot of people that think he's got absolute right to wear it. But to your point, we now continue to have undefeated Ohio State, undefeated Michigan next weekend. One of those teams obviously is going to win, but the winner, to your point, Scott, really needs to play an elite game. It really needs to make a statement because, as we had discussed, I thought the Big Ten champ would almost automatically be the number 2 seed in the CFP. And I don't see that anymore, even though I wholly believe that the 3 most talented teams in college football are Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State. I think those 3 have vastly more talent than almost anyone else. Now, Alabama is out of the picture. Georgia has been almost the remarkable model of consistency all year. And Ohio State is not. I don't think Ohio State has played its best game yet, which, obviously is a good case, bad case scenario for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, so let's just go through some games. We don't really need to rehash all of these, but, we thought Georgia was just going to handle Kentucky. It's a down Kentucky team. Georgia's had too much, and they won. It wasn't really much of a football game, honestly, but moving right along. Everybody has Georgia said the SEC game, SEC championship game. Most people think they handle LSU, and they're in the playoffs. Even if they don't handle LSU, they might still be in the playoffs.
Yeah. I think so. And, we're sitting here kind of nitpicking a double-digit road win at night or in the SEC or mid-afternoon, late afternoon into evening in the SEC, the end of November, against a team that peaked this year, ranked right around number 9 or number 10. So this is not to me remotely comparable to the way that the Vols slumbered through their shellacking at South Carolina or some of the other scare games. TCU, Baylor is a great rivalry. Some of the other contests we've seen, there's far more to understand about how Georgia ended up winning that game. Again, a double-digit victory. Again, undefeated in SEC play for the second year in a row. But that's more explainable to me than what we saw out of Georgia at Missouri. But nonetheless, this is a Georgia team that simply wins and moves forward and has played its best when it has needed its best.
Yeah, and they'll need the SEC championship game. It'll be a de facto home game. It'll be fun to see, and hopefully they play a great game. We'll see. TCU, Baylor. Baylor is just so well coached, had such a great game plan, controlled the ball throughout. TCU, Garrett Riley really designed some nice plays. I think about one, I don't know how to describe it. Receiver on the left runs this long bend post and is way out, and it's just a great play. It goes about 80 yards, didn't score, but Garrett Riley did a nice job there. And then TCU comes back and just fights and is still undefeated.
Yeah.
Golly, it's fun to watch.
At the end of that game, I was frankly stunned by the third down call. With out of timeouts, It was 3rd and 7-ish, and you ran essentially a draw or off the B gap. I was stunned. I was stunned that they ran it there. But I'll tell you what, I don't know that there's a better example of splendid coaching that we saw anywhere in college football this weekend than the way that TCU executed its Chinese fire drill to kick the game-winning field goal. I mean, that was a hell of a scenario, and that was flat-out coaching. They were smooth. I mean, it's a scramble. We've seen NFL teams blow those scenarios. We just saw an NFL game be decided in the final 30 seconds today when the Jets gave up a punt return for a touchdown to the Patriots with like 17 seconds left in the game. So again, we see special teams collapses at the greatest levels of football. This was brilliant. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting in the press box at Notre Dame at the time. They violated kind of their press box rules and had the Baylor TCU game on everywhere because everyone wanted to see it. They flipped away from NBC. Don't listen to that, NBC. And they had it on Fox for a moment so that all of us could see the end of that game. And it was phenomenal. And I'm sitting there saying to some guys next to me, I was like, there's no way he makes this. Like, this is chaos. And it was streamlined. I mean, it was smooth. That, to me, I'm telling you, that's one of my favorite coaching moments of the season.
Mark Tonderdahl is a special teams coordinator for TCU. He's a professional. I mean, a guy's done it everywhere. He's been all over the country. And he was with Sonny at Cal. I mean, he's a pro. Right. And just had his guys ready, go, kick the ball. Done. Sold. Fantastic. Great job. Moving right along. Alabama handled Austin Peay. We're not going to talk about it. Ole Miss goes to Vietnam. I might never call it anything other than that. How am I 40-something years old and had never heard that term before? Who am I?
I'm stunned because you're an SEC guy, and I picked up on it 20 years ago when I was just breaking into covering the SEC. So I can't take credit for it, but I have embraced it. Now, I'm one who really likes Little Rock and likes Fayetteville. Herman's Ribs are awesome in Fayetteville. So I love that term. I use that term pretty freely, Vietnam, because it's great and it's unlike anywhere else.
Yeah, it's a good term.
And it's unlike anywhere else you're going to go. And I'll tell you what, Ole Miss went to Vietnam and they got it put on them. I mean,
it seems like it happens to them every time they go there.
And it was not as close as the 15-point final margin. Not at all as close as the final margin. I mean, this was a dog walking, or this was a land shark baiting, whatever you want to call it. Arkansas got swole, and now they've got a chance to close the season with great momentum. And I said it on the podcast. Now, look, I could not have foreseen that type of victory, but I said they were better than their record, that I was bought into Sam Pittman, especially if KJ Jefferson was back. And I knew the atmosphere because I've been there at a night game. I saw Felix Jones and Darren McFadden. They're still running against Tennessee. Still running. So I just knew from the scene, and we've talked about it too. To Lane Kiffin's credit, he's got an 8-3 or 7-3 team or whatever it is. 8-3. He's got an 8-3 team that's positively not an 8-3 team.
Agreed. Yep. All right, jumping along. Ohio State handled Maryland, not in a big way. They just kept the lead out there and won the game. That's what you're supposed to do, win the game.
Showed their talent. Travion Henderson, who's been dinged up, had the game's first touchdown. But then a breakout game for freshman Dallin Hayden. I'm going to brag a little bit. I'm friends with his dad, former Tennessee star Aaron Hayden, played several years in the NFL, scored the game-winning touchdown in Tennessee's miraculous 1991 win at Notre Dame. But Dallin Hayden, the true freshman who was a national recruit out of Memphis last year and picked Ohio State, had an absolute breakout game, a brilliant game, and they needed it. But again, that's why I talk about the talent of Ohio State. 1 through 85, I'm telling you, they're as talented as anybody else in college football. They're more talented. They're more talented in spots like skill than a Georgia is, but that doesn't mean that Georgia's sheer physicality and talent in both sides of the trenches wouldn't be a deciding factor if those two teams play. But talent, NFL future-wise, all of that, Ohio State's right there.
Year in, year out, always. Yeah. Difference is the SEC defensive lines.
Right.
It's not like 1 through 4 in the defensive line. The SEC is like 1 through 12. Yeah. Well, they got 12 dudes. They go in there and just dominate. That's all. All right, so we talked about Michigan handling Illinois. You got any other thoughts there or moving along?
I'm curious to see the Big Ten's response. If you read what we wrote on FootballScoop and you see the traction that it got on social media, and look, the world is not social media, but there's Michigan fans out there on social media saying Illinois got jobbed. So what does the Big Ten do? And I'll make this plea again. Officiating is hard. I'm not being critical of the officials. I'm being critical of the fact we don't have a professional officials association for college football, and we need it. We need it now more than ever With NIL money, with the TV money, with the scrutiny, with the social media prevalence that causes a lot of people to be unfairly called out, players, coaches, otherwise, we need improvement in the ranks of officiating.
Moving right along, I did not foresee Shane Beamer's squad being able to do this to Tennessee. I also don't know how Georgia broke Tennessee so badly, but they are. What happened?
Well, you could say they broke Tennessee so badly, but then Tennessee came back last week, and
they weren't great last week.
How many teams would love to be not great and have a 42-point conference win? We're sitting here talking about Ohio State and Michigan eking out like 12-point and 2-point wins, and Tennessee won by 42 in a game against the Missouri team that we just talked played Georgia to the final play of the game.
They just lost 25 at South Carolina. They're broken.
They are broken now. They were
the number one team in the country. Arguably, inarguably, they were the number one team in the country. They just lost by 25 to South Carolina.
You're right. They are broken now, and how they respond, I think, is going to tell you a lot about Josh Heupel in the here and now and moving forward, the stability of this program. There's a lot of crazy stuff trickling out of Knoxville. First of all, in speaking with people in Knoxville, there's great concern that it is a torn ACL for Hendon Hooker.
Oh, no.
Very, very significant concern. Nobody's ready to say that's what it is, but yeah, let me just find the tweet or the text I got so that I am 100% accurate here in what I share. But not confirmed, but definitely what is feared. So there's obviously concern there. It's concerned that again, ACL, MCL, that area. Great concern. And then Tennessee didn't have Jeremy Banks last night, their senior leader linebacker. And Josh Heupel was very cagey in not addressing why Banks wasn't there. Banks put out a statement on social media today saying he's fine. There wasn't any altercation. Now there's a lot of chatter about an altercation last week between Hendon Hooker and Jeremy Banks. I tend to think that there's some merit to that. And that there was a one-game suspension doled out. So for the first time, after overachieving a year ago, after overachieving through 9 weeks of this season, there's some real legitimate adversity for Josh Heupel at Tennessee. And we shouldn't forget that within all that, and not any fault of Josh Heupel and company, but the NCAA still hasn't doled out its punishment against Tennessee, and that's coming very soon. That's coming There's movement towards finalizing the penalties that will be applied to Tennessee, which, again, no fault of Josh Heupel or Danny White or any of those people, but it's more adversity to handle.
All right. We talked about SC just getting it done versus UCLA, back and forth, 48-45, just fantastic. I'm going to skip on, moving on. Clemson handled Miami. I think we talked about Clemson got right against Louisville, which was good. Utah, Oregon. Wow. Good for Oregon, man. Way to come back.
How about Bo Nix? He's not going to win the Heisman, but I think he's college football's comeback player of the year. He's just been absolutely phenomenal. And what he did last night to deliver that win, such a significant win for the Ducks, to get them into that Pac-12 championship game, and the fact that he sealed the game, he could barely move, and he sealed the game by darting ahead to move the sticks late in the game and put Oregon in victory formation after Utah twice moved to the 50 or beyond and had chances to at minimum try a field goal or win the game and simply could not get it done. This Utah team will look back at the end of this year and absolutely have to figure out how to play better on the road. A team good enough to be a bit undermanned and beat USC at home, and also a really great game of college football this season. Loses to a Florida team that just lost to Vanderbilt on the road. Loses to this Oregon team on the road, and committed, I want to say, 4 or 5 turnovers and lost double digits to UCLA on the road. So Utah's going to go 9-3, I believe, and have 3 road losses that are going to leave it scratching its head.
Just because you mentioned Florida losing to Vanderbilt, I don't know what the appropriate punishment is, but Billy Napier is going to take some abuse from his SEC head coaching brethren next time they all get together, Dustin. Woo, there's going to be some backhanded jokes, compliments, laughs at his expense, and there's nothing you can do about it, Billy. Just take it like a man and get better next year.
Shout out Clark Lee, Nick Lazinski, all those guys at Vanderbilt, and they've had some adversity in the last few weeks as well. And yet here they are, winners of 2 consecutive games in SEC play, knocking off Kentucky and Florida. So 2 consecutive wins for Vanderbilt in SEC play after a 26-game losing streak, and wins against teams that spent multiple weeks of this season ranked in the top 25. And Mike Wright has played a lot better directing the Vanderbilt offense. So a lot of great people at Vanderbilt. Clark Lee, a great man. Nick Lazinski, one of the all-time best young coaches. Just such a genuine dude. So happy for some folks down there.
You mentioned, I believe, on our preview podcast from Friday, you expected Penn State to handle Rutgers in a big way.
I actually said I thought that Rutgers would cover. You said Penn State is playing much better. So
your memory is good.
Even though you got the hell beat out of you in picks this week, I'll give you that one. You got that one right. I will point out that Rutgers had an early lead, I think 7-0 or 10-7 or 14-10, and then Penn State poured it on. So for a while, I was looking like I was not only going to sweep our 5 swing games, but also get my one game where I said Rutgers would cover. But
moving right along, Georgia Tech, Ramblin' Wreck. What's up, Brent Key? Good win at North Carolina. North Carolina was 9-1 walking in that one. Needed that win to kind of get up top 10.
Yeah, I don't think we can completely rule out Brent Key as a possible solution for Georgia Tech. He's got some key support, no pun intended. He's got some of the right people in his corner. He needed not to lose to Virginia a few weeks ago for sure. But he gains more by beating North Carolina, a ranked 9-1 team, away from home than what he does probably for beating Virginia and then losing to North Carolina. So that's been an enigmatic search. You know, we've heard Jamie Chadwell's name in that. We've heard Bill O'Brien's name in that, Del McGee's name in that, among some others. But Brent Key is doing everything he can. And they've really persevered through adversity. They don't have the wins to show it like a Louisville does, who I'm so impressed with. But I think they might have played their 4th string quarterback in this game, Scott. It's minimum 3rd or 4th string. And they had a guy quit the team. They had a quarterback quit the team. So they had an injury. They had like the 2nd string quarterback get frustrated and quit the team. Then they had another injury. You know, they've had some staff changes in the middle of the season, not just from the top down. A lot to be said for the way Brent Key has banded them together. I'll tell you right now, if he pulled the ultimate miracle next week and somehow beat Georgia, they'd give him the job on the spot.
I would agree. Yep. I think that's his shot, to be honest, because I don't think that's the direction that search is going. I hear a lot of Chadwell. I hear a lot of Willie Fritz.
Fritz, I should.
You know, Bat coming from Alabama. Yeah, you got to keep Bill O'Brien in the conversation, especially with Nick's involvement in a lot of these things. So we'll see. Moving right along, K-State and West Virginia. K-State, show out. Let's go.
Yeah, Chris Kleiman, what a great coaching job. So many great coaching jobs in a bunch of different spots this year. It's hard for me to pick the best one. I had to cast my Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year ballot over the weekend, and I could only include 3 guys. And I'll tell you, typically I think it's a big-time layup to just like, you know which guy's number 1, and then you're going to add 2 guys. This was incredibly, incredibly difficult. One of the toughest ballots that I've had to cast. So I'd say all that to just say hell of a job, Chris Kleiman. And, the 2 college football coaches in Kansas right now, between Lance Leipold and Chris Kleiman, I'd put up against, a lot of coaches at 2 Power 5 programs in any other state, and doing so much with so much less.
First of all, both of them are ball coaches, but the the other side, both of them are great individuals, great humans, like people you'd want your son to go play for because you want to learn from these guys and live with these guys and experience like them in your life. That kind of dudes. All right, so John, I know you were at Boston College, was at Notre Dame. You were there, and the only reason I know that is because I saw a tweet where you showed the scene. And I was like, "That's really happening right now at Notre Dame." It was straight up awesome. It was a beautiful sight to see.
It was insane. We had special friends who were supposed to join us from East Tennessee, retired college administrator, couldn't make it because of the snow. We had a friend from Houston, assistant district attorney, couldn't make it as well. They missed one of the most unique scenes I've ever seen in a college football game. Now, I spent, for some different stories I'm working on, I spent a lot of extra time on the field pregame and at the end of the game. It was unbelievably cold. Not the coldest game. 2015 Tennessee at Missouri is the coldest I've ever done, but one of the coldest games and the snowiest game. Just picturesque. If you want to see the tweet, I would appreciate it. It's at John Brice 1 on my Twitter. Scott retweeted it and said something like, "What a scene." It's a 28-second video. I promise you, it's worth 30. It's worth 30 seconds of your time to see what these kids played in yesterday. And speaking of coaching jobs, Marcus Freeman, 5 wins in a row, 8 out of 9. They've got a chance to spoil everything for USC. Really, they stand as being potentially one of the ultimate wreckers of the college football playoff, just the same way that South Carolina did last night.
If you're of the boat that USC might get in over LSU when LSU beats Georgia. Oh, that was funny. Moving right along. Okay, how about Navy, who is not having a good season, showing up and putting Gus back in his bus? How about that?
Putting Gus back in his bus after you think you can trust UCF and you can't. But you never doubt. It's been 3 incredibly frustrating seasons for Navy and Ken Niumatalolo. But they always will find a way to rise up in an incredible game and be something that is really impressive. And this was it. And you take it back to the second half last week against Notre Dame when they outscored Notre Dame 19-0. And then they do this, the 6 best quarters of Navy football in probably the last 3, 4, 5 years.
I'm a transition. Zach Barnett, big OU fan, big OU supporter, straight up told us Oklahoma was going to beat Oklahoma State. And I kind of like, really? He did. Oklahoma came out 28-0.
Yeah. And, again, that's a game that was not as close as the final. I thought that Mike Gundy's experience, Oklahoma State's overall depth and experience would be difference makers in this game. They never had a chance to be a difference maker. And you talk about teams that have been broken. Oklahoma State is a team that's been broken.
Yeah. Louisville played well. Got NC State, just handled the game.
Just systematically controlled the game. Again, Scott Satterfield, from where they were, as I sit here and talk about some of the great coaching jobs this season in college football, how Scott Satterfield held that program together and got to this point. And, man, the Commonwealth Cup is going to be a ton of fun next week. It's going to matter. It used to be possibly the only way Scott Satterfield could save his job. Scott Satterfield has just splendidly held together that program and set up what I'm excited to see. I've had a lot of family in Kentucky through the years, so always paid closer attention to some of these games. I think it's an underrated football rivalry. I think it's a magnificent basketball rivalry. I'm excited for Kentucky, Louisville next weekend. And frankly, as we look at the second halves of the season, there are 2 programs trending in completely opposite directions.
Yeah. There were something like 400 people at Texas A&M Kyle Field for Thriller versus UMass. I will not speak of that game ever again. Vanderbilt beat Florida. We touched on that. UConn lost to Army. Virginia Tech came back and beat Liberty. Good for Brent Pry's program. It's a program that needed that. You feel good when good guys win a game. I'd love to see Hugh win the game too, but pride. He needed one. He did need something to build on.
He did. They needed a foundational type of win like that, especially against an on-the-rise in-state program that you're going to have to win some recruiting battles against. Mm-hmm. We saw Liberty peak a couple of weeks ago with that win at Arkansas, and now they've dropped a couple of games in a row that you just don't expect. Not this Liberty with Hugh Freeze. You don't expect the Flames to lose.
When you go play at an SEC team, that takes a toll on you physically a little bit. Maybe that's what's involved. Maybe it's not. I don't know. All right. So I think we're going to do a short pod after this on Wisconsin. Wisconsin came back and beat Nebraska at the end, and we'll talk about that later. Moving right along, the Dukies didn't play very well, to be honest. Had a legit shot. First of all, the touchdown was crazy to get him to within 2. And then actually called a pretty decent 2-point play. The receiver just didn't throw the ball when he had a shot to throw the ball, and then got tackled and game over. You got anything else, JB, on that one?
I don't have a lot on that one, no.
Yeah. Washington State's defense is good. I was the sucker who thought Arizona was actually better than Arizona was. Sorry. Moving right along. Kansas did not beat Texas. Disappointment? I'm kidding. I don't know. South Alabama and Troy both have 9 wins. Congratulations, gents. 2 great coaching jobs down there. Really good dudes. Happy to see that. Okay. I am going to jump to Montana State. Montana. JB, you talked about this one. Montana State. What's up?
Incredible. What they did.
Outstanding.
What they did running the football. Again, I referenced Taylor Housewright's offense last week. I'm really bullish on his future in the coaching world. And obviously, I think there's a great shot we see a Montana State, South Dakota State national championship, or certainly I think those are the 2 best teams in FCS as we look at the brackets revealed today. But let me throw a couple of Montana State rushing stats at you. After yesterday's performance, they now have 6 games this season with 300-plus rushing yards. 6 games with 300-plus. I'm not sure where they finished up yesterday. I don't have the box score in front of me, but I was talking with somebody at the game. Late in the contest, as they led 48-7, Montana State had 390 rushing yards against the number 4 defense in FCS, against one of the most storied FCS programs of the last quarter century, one of the most consistent, one of the most well-coached, one of the most disciplined and fundamentally sound. And Montana State just absolutely put the Grizz in a bear trap and showed no mercy. And just a physical bashing in maybe the only scene that was better than South Bend this weekend from a weather standpoint, because I believe they were hovering with some below 0 temps throughout the hours leading up to that game.
How about old Hatch finishing up with a hard-fought win over Mercer? Hatcher finishes 10-1. How about Holy Cross? Chesney, Bob, man, undefeated. Goodness, there's some good ball played in FCS.
Really impressive. Hatcher, their only loss, 33-0 at Georgia, as we've discussed. There's zero shame in that loss when you see what other teams have had done to them by the University of Georgia this year, the defending CFP champions and on pace to potentially repeat as CFP champions. So Samford gets a bye, gets a national seed at number 6. That's big time. The SoCon gets 2 teams in. Shout out to Hatcher. Shout out to Clay Hendricks and Furman, who retooled a ton of their staff this offseason. Remember, they lost Brian Bratton to the Indianapolis Colts. They lost George Quarles to become the head coach at ETSU. They lost their offensive line coach, who left with Quarles to go to ETSU. They lost, I believe, Ken Lemondola to go become the linebackers coach at Air Force. Clay Hendricks is a guy that absolutely, along with Hatcher, deserve FCS Coach of the Year consideration. I mean, just 2 really remarkable jobs. And it shows you what stability and a vision and a program that you believe in its foundation and its tenets will do for you. So I've discussed it. I discussed it in the Notre Dame press box. I get a lot of grief from other media about how much I write about Deion and how much I love FCS football. And I really don't care because I love writing about Deion. I think it's one of the most compelling stories in all of college football. And I love FCS coaching. It's some of the best football coaching anywhere is at the FCS level.
How about Sac State finishing off 11-0, 27-21 winner over Davis. Rich Rod finishes 9-2 at Jack State. Man, there's good ball being played this level. I love it. Love it. John Brice, what kind of bourbon you like, buddy? Because I feel like there's going to be a shipment coming your way.
Let me just say two things. And, I'm focused on the process, first of all. So I'm not discussing that bourbon. I have another week of games ahead of me. We play what's in front of us. We expect to win. We get really upset when we have bad weekends that give chumps like you hope. And so it's all about the process. It's all about the process. I'm not focused on bourbon or anything else. But I do want to say two things. I'm wearing a UT Martin hat. Shout out to Jason Simpson. First time in school history, they're back-to-back OVC champs, co-champs. They're not going to the playoffs because they lost a coin toss to SEMO. Shout out to SEMO for being in position to win that coin toss by virtue of, like the Skyhawks, what SEMO did on the field this year. Really impressive. And as we talked about that South Carolina win against Tennessee, would be terrible not to very quickly mention arguably the most maligned coordinator in all of college football this year has been Marcus Satterfield. He called the game of his life last night in just absolutely eviscerating and dissecting the Vols. It looked like he was playing operation, and he never hit the edge. He never caused the nose to light up. He was surgical with his game plan. And I tweeted this. The Vols had their best season in 20 years, 21 years, their best hope to be nationally relevant at the end of the year in 21 years, dashed by two guys who started their career as GAs at the University of Tennessee in Shane Beamer and Marcus Satterfield. Moreover, Marcus Satterfield grew up at Greenback, Tennessee, which is about 24 miles from the University of Tennessee campus. His dad was a legendary high school football coach at Greenback. Marcus was a great player and played at ETSU. And those two guys with those deep Tennessee ties effectively ended Tennessee's season. Football, baby. That's my whole point.
College football expert. He's looking forward to his bourbon. Can't believe he just called me a chump.
Process.
I don't know what to do with that. I don't know.
Process over product. Process.
The Football Scoop Podcast. We always enjoy giving quick recaps on all these games. We're about to record another one. We're going to talk specifically about Wisconsin. Y'all stay tuned. Appreciate everybody being with us. I am at Football Scoop. He is at John D. Brice 1. Always check the scoop. We're out.